Hey everybody, my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. I just want to talk about how you make life easier for people. People try to come up with all sorts of random schemes and clever gimmicks when it comes to trying to alleviate poverty and provide people with aid. But at the end of the day, the solution's quite simple. Okay? Just get out of the way, okay? And specifically when it comes to taxes, regulations, and licensing. So let's tackle each one of these three and see how it does make life harder and makes everyone's life harder. Okay, so at the end of the day, you gotta remember money is time. So in order for you to generate the income or wealth that you have to give up time at some point. So even if you're generating money passively through some sort of investment you made, you had to make the money you made in that investment. Or someone else gave up time because you inherited the money. But at the end of the day, all wealth requires some sort of giving up of time. So the more you take of wealth, the more time you're taking at the same time. Okay, and it's an important distinction. Once you see that, you start seeing how all this starts fitting into place. So if I tax you, so I take more and more of your income, what's going to happen is, you got to think about it, you have two things. You got the money that you need to live and the money you save. First thing that's going to happen is you're going to save less and less and less. The effect of that is going to be less investment capital in the economy, because all investment capital is savings. And it doesn't mean necessarily money in a savings account. It could be anything, because the idea of savings is you're not using it yet. So whether you're buying a stock, you're buying a bond, you're buying cryptocurrency, you're putting it in a savings account, you're putting it under your mattress, okay, somebody else cannot borrow or make use of capital unless somebody else chooses not to use it. Okay, so the only way for investment to occur means somebody else chose not to use their capital today. So if you're saving less, that's less capital for investment, which means less new businesses, less new jobs, less new opportunities for innovation and making our lives better. But eventually you can tax all that away. And then you start taxing the cost of living. Okay, you start taxing the money we spend to live. And once you do that, you do something even worse, because people have to live. So if you take more money than you take so much money from them that they can't afford to pay their bills, that means they're gonna have to pursue other income, okay? Which could result in them looking for more hours at work, not because they want to work more, but because they have to work more. And the result of that is a couple different things. One, they're spending less time at home with their family. They're spending less time in their community helping others. They're spending less time enjoying life. And two, because they're competing for all of the hours of available labor at work, that means somebody else is not able to get those hours of labor who may be even further behind. Okay, and it creates this sort of competition for the available labor hours that are available. Okay, and that makes everyone worse off. Okay, because there's less labor hours to go around. Now, let's keep going. Go farther down that rabbit hole. Desperate people start doing desperate things. So this could also lead to an increase in crime, because people start pursuing other ways to generate that income. Start looking to do things that may be around the legal system because they need to put food on the table. And on top of it, the economy is stagnating because of the lack of investment. Okay, so now that we see that, that's taxes. Now let's go to regulations. Okay, you go to a business and you start putting more and more and more rules. And it's not just the heart of the rule, like what does the rule achieve? And oftentimes that doesn't happen because rules have to be enforced. And oftentimes the people enforcing the rules don't fully understand the businesses that they're enforcing it on, so they don't enforce it that well. And the ones that do sometimes enforce it selectively, because they have relationships with some companies and they don't have relationships with others. So it's much easier to enforce harder on those you don't have a relationship with. There's a lot of sort of discretion. It's not like, a rule gets perfectly enforced uniformly across all firms. So it creates advantages and disadvantages for different companies. Okay, so basically those who have the coziest relationship with the bureaucrats who enforce the rules are going to have the most flexibility with the rules, and those that have the least relationship, who may be just trying to run their business, are going to have the hardest time and the biggest disadvantage with the rules. So it creates an incentive to have a close relationship with government, because otherwise the rules get enforced harder. And if you're going to have that close relationship with government anyways, you might as well ask them for some other favors. So then you start really breeding corruption that way. But on top of it, that business that has to keep up with those costs, it's not just the costs. There is the financial cost of compliance, where you're going to have to hire people, specifically lawyers, which are not cheap, to help you comply with these laws. Because the rules may seem, people just imagine rules as like in a vacuum. But rules are oftentimes, when they finally get written, are really complex. They're open to interpretation, so you need lawyers to specifically help you make sure that you're complying with the rules, not just what you think the rules are. So you end up spending a lot of money on legal work, then paying other people to actually help be there and keeping an eye on these things. And those are resources. That's money that you're spending in that business that money cannot reinvest into itself, cannot pay out to its other employees. That's not being spent on its core business and distracting from its core business. Same thing goes with taxes. All the money you spend on accountants, the time that is spent preparing those taxes and preparing all this paperwork is money that's distracting from its core business. And that means the core business suffers for that lack of that distraction. Okay, which limits, and again, the lack of resources, the distraction, limits its growth, okay, which also limits the availability of, opportunities, work, innovation. So that's the thing with regulations. You're still increasing costs. Costs mean less time. Cool. Okay, and on top of that, you're changing all sorts of incentives as far as which businesses are better to invest in, because you've changed now the potential profit the company can achieve, and investment capital is going to move based on sort of where it can achieve a return. So basically, if you lower the return of an industry because you've over-regulated it, because you thought the profit was too much, well, you've just starved that industry of capital. Because oftentimes the profit levels that exist because oftentimes a younger industry is riskier to invest in, but achieves higher returns when successful. And those higher profit levels are good because it helps incentivize all the capital to help develop that industry to its maturity. If you cut that off with regulations because you're like, oh, they're just making too much money, then what happens is you cut off that industry's ability to mature and develop to its later stage levels. Okay? And then third, licensing. Licensing is especially pernicious because you create a rigidity of labor. So then people get stuck physically where they are and in the occupation that they're in. Okay, which makes it, when people are less flexible and able to pursue opportunity, then they do get stuck being poor. Okay, so what happens here is, and licensing oftentimes comes with a cost, not just a fee to maintain your license, but oftentimes with time you have to take different exams and courses, and oftentimes those courses aren't teaching you how to do the job that you have, are just testing you on your awareness of the regulations in that particular industry. I know, my job is literally to train people for financial securities licensing. That's what I do all day. And a lot of the stuff that I'm teaching is not necessarily how to do their job, but what are the rules? Okay, why? Because the whole point of a license isn't to certify quality, it's to certify liability. Okay, it's basically say you understand the rules, so if you break the rules, you can't come back later and say you didn't know the rules. Okay, and while there's a place for that, there's different ways it can be done. Like, we'll also certify competency through things like private certification, which we have in the financial industry, things like a certified financial planner program, certified chartered financial analyst. There's all these designations you can get privately that at the same time certify competency and knowledge of regulations that are not legally required for you to do, that achieve the same thing and are more highly regarded. So it can be done. But again, so licensing. So if you're that single mom who is making minimum wage and you want to try a different industry and you decide you want to get a license, you want to go into a different occupation, you'll have to get the licenses for that occupation. Now that can require a lot of time of studying and taking courses, time that you can't necessarily afford to take. So that for that person who could use that opportunity more, it's going to be less accessible to them. Okay, while people who it is accessible to are probably people who didn't need the opportunity as much as anyways. Not that they shouldn't have it, but you're not necessarily, you're disenfranchising those who need it the most. At the same time, a lot of these licenses are state by state. So then what happens is the minute you want to leave the state you're in, you have to re-license all over again, making people stuck where they are. So if the economy in their state is not doing well, they're stuck there. Okay, and then again, they can't afford to switch industries because of the time lag that it would take to get a new license. So people become stuck where they are, and this creates a political pressure to always support every industry by government, because labor has become more rigid and less dynamic, less flexible, less adaptive. And basically what happens is that the government spends time and resources supporting industries that need to change and reshuffle, instead of letting new industries thrive and develop. So hopefully this gives you an idea of, if you change these things, regulation, licensing, and taxing, you'll make life a lot better. People will keep more of their paycheck, which means they're going to have more time to spend in their communities, more time with their family, and there's going to be more capital to invest. Okay, it's going to be the same thing with regulation. Businesses will be able to focus more on their core businesses, grow faster, have more resources to reinvest in their businesses. And without licensing, people can pursue opportunities more adaptively, more dynamically, and systematic poverty will be a lot less of a thing because of these things, on top of all the other issues I've spoken about in other videos regarding things like prohibition and etc. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much. Have a great day and enjoy.